Okay, friends, it's Buy Low Week 5. We've got a couple of really intriguing names on this one and kind of a new angle or two to play. And also, of course, we'll be looking back at things we've already said because it's really important not just to shout names into the sky and then move along with our day like nothing happened. That stuff has actual impact. Welcome. I'm Dan Besbris, DanBesbris on social media. You guys know that by now. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Old Man Squad is my account on the new Blue Sky. Old Man Squad is the network feed on Twitter. Old Man Squad Fantasy on Instagram. Please like, rate, and subscribe as you settle into taking the show. And quickly here, Bet Online is the world's, that's right, most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the easiest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With, on top of all of that, the largest selection of odds on everything from football to NBA to college basketball to NHL to UFC and MMA. So that is why you must head to Bet Online today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here. You guys kind of know the drill by now, so let's just get cooking. This is Buy Low Week 5. We haven't done 5 of them, but it is Week 5. And sometimes the perfect buy low, this is sort of the theme of the day, is a player that someone else has waited for, but then let them down. And I want to talk a tiny bit about that concept because people do this wrong. And a lot of what we do on these trade episodes of the show is I want to try to get you guys understanding the mental gymnastics that have to go into actually pulling off any kind of trades. Trying to trade for a player when they're close to coming back is extraordinarily hard. You have to trade for a player before the manager knows when they're coming back. Make sure that one's sunk in. Oh, Nikola Jokic just got ruled out right in the middle of us talking. Still out on personal stuff. Man, that's crazy. My Jokic team is floundering. That's not true. It's a roto team. It'll be fine because missed games happen. It's okay. It's okay. Back to the topic at hand. Let's say an example of this would be like Kawhi Leonard. You could trade for Kawhi Leonard right now really easily because the only update we've had in like the last 5 weeks is actually pretty recent, mind you, but he's participating in shooting drills now or something like that. So we don't know. We have no idea when Kawhi comes back. My hope was to see him by the end of November, but it's looking like that is less and less likely. So maybe early to mid-December is the more reasonable target. But in any event, like, we're still guessing. As opposed to, say, like Damian Lillard yesterday, you can't wait for him to get the go-ahead and then try to trade for these guys. You have to trade for them when the manager is getting frustrated and doesn't really know when these players are coming back. And we're going to get into that a little bit later on in today's show with a couple of names that I think basically are hovering right on the edge of that. Also, the flip side of this is, so let's say you accept my first premise, which is you can't trade for a guy right after you get news that they're coming back. The managers waited that whole time. They're going to see how that player does when they come back. But what if that player lays an egg? What if that player lays 3 eggs? What if that player lays like 5 eggs after coming back? Then it's like a double bonus buy low. Because the player waited for them, the manager, I should say, the player of fantasy basketball, not the player of real basketball. The fantasy manager waited on this dude, whoever they might be, and we'll tell you a couple of them in a minute, for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. Now they're getting nothing out of them. So they're double frustrated. They're frustrated because they had to wait, and then they're frustrated because they waited, and it's not working. That's when you can maybe post a buy low on somebody. Not right after they come back, because if they play well, you're doomed. And not after like the first bad game. But if there's 2 or 3, suddenly you've got a little narrow window you can dive through. Let's quickly go over some of the names we had thrown out earlier on these shows. Our very first buy low was after 2 days of basketball. Those names were Haliburton, Butler, Claxton, Bogdanovich, Cat, Suggs, Garland, Edey, and Tobias. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah, Jalen Suggs had a bad first game because he got in foul trouble. Then obviously he took off. Darius Garland, pretty similar situation. Zach Edey has leveled off a bit. Tobias started very slowly. He's come up a bit, not all the way to where we want him to be. Cat had a bad first game, and one of my longtime listeners, frequent trollers, was like, oh, you guys, you ruined everything, and now he's a first rounder. Bogdanovich ended up taking a month off with some, I think it was, they call it tendinopathy. Was that the final rule? Well, they had like a small procedure, and now he's working his way back. So that one kind of got blown up. Nick Claxton has mostly been hurt so far this year as well. So that one also failing. And then Jimmy Butler. Oh, wait, let's talk Haliburton first. Haliburton is still a buy low, but not as significant as it was before. He's come back a bit. He still can't shoot, but he's come back a little bit. And then Jimmy Butler is important because he actually made it on the next buy low board, which we did 2 weeks later, 2.5 weeks later, because the first one was like late week 1, and then the next one was early week 4. Jimmy Butler came back because not only was he hurt at that point, but he also was shooting like 73% at the free throw line. Well, Butler came back yesterday, posted a colossal game, and so now that buy low window is dead. What about the other names that I mentioned on our show last week? Lauri Markkanen, very minor progress. You can still buy low on him, and the fact that he's still not doing all that much means you can probably buy just a little itty bit lower. So if it was going to take you like a top 45 guy to get Markkanen last week, you'd probably get him for like a top 50 guy after one more week of just being kind of pedestrian. And I know the fear's there. We talked about it on last week's show. He's a shutdown risk, but he's missing games early. Utah's exceptionally bad this year, with or without him. So they might not need to shut him down as early because remember, the last couple of years, Utah was accidentally winning ball games, and they had to make sure that their lotto odds got better. Forget for the first 2 or 3 picks, but just to like make sure that they held on to their slot, whatever that was, 5th worst record or 7th worst record or whatever. They're down at the bottom already this year. Everything's going according to plan. Freddie VanVleet was one of the other names from last week. He's come on brilliantly over the last 7 days. He's now in the early 40s in overall rank after being, I think, in the 70s prior to that. And if you're looking at the last week, where the hell's Fred the last week? It's been pretty good, as I recall. He is number 23 the last week. Yeah, a little bit, keep that going for me, buddy. That'll work. So that one no longer is buyable. Josh Giddey's still buyable. He's been not great, actually, over the last week. Still shooting poorly. Still not doing the other stuff that you kind of wanted him to do. I still think that we're very much still talking about a guy who's probably going to be in that like 80 to 100 range. So was he getting drafted too early? Almost definitely. So then we have to ask ourselves, like, well, how low are you willing to go? And I'd be looking to move someone, like a slightly overperforming 10th, 11th rounder kind of dude that maybe would get the job done. I forget. I mean, who did we say last week on this one? Someone like a Grady Dick you could throw out there because he's been scoring a lot. I think people know that it's not gonna last forever, but not everybody knows that because based on how many times I get yelled at. Jeremy Grant still tumbling like a boulder after a quick start. You could try throwing out a young name like a Bub Carrington. I like Daniel Gafford, but maybe he fits here for Giddey. And then Drew Holiday, who finally had his first game with defensive stats and then promptly had to sit one out. He's on his way up. I still think you can buy low on Drew. I still think people haven't really fully realized why he's ranked 130th instead of 80th. And it's exclusively because he has no defensive stats so far. His steals and blocks are way down, and everything else is almost exactly where you'd expect. So what does that mean? Anyway, I think you can just hit repeat on last week's on that one. But Markin is certainly the one from last week that I think probably deserves, to get more attention as still a pretty good buy low and maybe even slightly cheaper. Let's get into this week's. And one of them is a retread from week 1. And that's why I didn't want to talk about him too much. And that's Tyrese Haliburton, who's ranked 50th, but I still have him as a top 15 guy. And I know you guys are going to think that's completely nuts. But the funny part is I was low on Haliburton coming into the season. You guys remember that? Not low in like, oh, he shouldn't get drafted in the first round low, but low in from a straight roto standpoint. I thought he was going to be like number 11 or 12. Basically like the last month of last season. Now, factor in a couple of guys jumping into the first round so far that we didn't expect to be there, like a Vooch, Jalen Williams at number 8. We thought he'd be in like the 20s. He's way hotter than expected. Cat being number 5 instead of like number 14 or something like that. And so you factor all that in, and that would have just sort of by itself pushed Haliburton from 11 or 12 down to 15 or something like that. And that's where I think he probably belongs. And I'm pretty sure that you can still get him for not that much because he's only scoring 16 points, and everybody's always looking at points, even though he was always sort of the punt points first rounder anyway. He's still shooting an ungodly 38% from the field. His free throws up to 81.5 at least, which is a little bit of an improvement, but not as high as we'd expect it to go. The assists are at 8.5, so that's not a total mess anymore. And so a lot of stuff for him has actually been trending the right way, but the shooting has remained so bad that I don't know that anybody's even really noticed it. Last 2 weeks, he's number 35, despite still shooting 38% over that stretch. A lot of the metrics for Haliburton are pretty good over the last 2 weeks. It's just the shot. Like last 1 week, he's shooting 32%. This stuff is really bad. But I cannot, and maybe it does last the entire year. Like that, like these crazy things, they really don't happen though. They just don't. And so I think you can get him for someone inside the top 30. And I'm not saying go give up Jordan Poole because he's number 30. You're going to get laughed out of the building. But like LeBron at 27, not an insane thing to think about offering up. Dame at 24, not an insane name to think about offering up. People are like, well, should I give up LaMelo? Well, it kind of depends on your team build because LaMelo is very much an I'm awful at turnovers and field goal percent guy. If you don't care about the turnovers, then you probably stay with LaMelo. But like, what about Darius Garland at 21? Do you give him up? Yeah, I'd give him up. JJJ at 19 while shooting 54%. Yep, give him up. De'Aaron Fox at 17 because he's had all of his teammates out and scored 110 points in 2 games. Basically, I rounded. Yep. So it's still out there and it's still doable. Try to do it. Next name on the list brings us back to one of the things we were talking about, and that's Joel Embiid. And I know that this is going to be a difficult one to swallow if you're in a head-to-head league because he is liable to sit most back-to-backs. I know he's saying that he wants to play in some. I don't believe him. I think the overarching thing here with Embiid is that you had the thing where somebody waited for him, and now he's been bad. And now the Sixers are having team meetings where Embiid is getting challenged by Tyrese Maxey to be less of a butthole, basically. And so all the press right now on Embiid is negative. He took a long time to come back. There was all the weird, like, we're on our own timeline crap. And now his teammates are pissed at him. I don't think that this window lasts very long. In fact, look up what the hell does Philly's schedule look like the rest of this week. I don't usually have to look at schedule for the Buy Low show. They play tomorrow on Wednesday at Memphis. They host Brooklyn on Friday. They host the Clippers on Sunday. There is a very real chance that because of this team meeting and because of all the negative press, that Embiid is going to come out and just stomp on someone. So you may legitimately have like half a day to try to execute this buy low. But I think it can be done. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to take to get it done. But Embiid right now is ranked number 141 in 9Cat. Admittedly, he's only played in a couple of games. I know that it's the small sample size stuff. He's only played in 3 games. But he's at 30 minutes, and he's at 15 points and 6 rebounds, and he's shooting 32%. And so people might look at this and go, what the hell is going on with this guy? I waited all this time. The minutes are there, but he's not even doing anything with them. Yeah, I mean, he's rusty. He's rusty as hell. He's still beat up. He's out of shape. He's late to things. He's not, like, the conditioning is not there. He's in his training camp, which takes a couple of weeks. But sometimes adrenaline and rage take over, and you can jump a day or two of training camp, and that might be what happens tomorrow. Right now, and I might even be too high on this. I put that it might take, I wrote unclear for those that are not watching the video if you're listening after the fact. The price tag to me is unclear. I guessed top 25, but it might be cheaper than that. Like, you might be able to get Joel Embiid for Evan Mobley right now, who's number 36. And hell yeah, I would do it. Because this is still Joel Embiid at the end of the day. Alperen Şengün, Jalen Johnson, Bam Adebayo. These guys are down approaching the edge of the top 50. And they might get it done. And I know he's going to sit back-to-backs, and there's probably going to be other stuff that goes on. But we're still talking about Joel frickin' Embiid here. He's playing now. He looks like trash, but he's playing. He's not on the shelf. He's not in his own little ramp-up. He's in an active participant ramp-up before our eyes. And it looks bad, but he shot 53% last year. He's 20% under the likely number that he's going to be looking at as this season goes on. This is a guy who's going to probably approach 30 points per game and over 10 rebounds and 4 to 6 assists and a steal and over a block and over a three-pointer and a mega impact free throw guy. We're talking about he was number 1 before he got hurt last year. We're talking about a guy that could potentially be the number 1 player in all of fantasy basketball. I don't think he's catching Jokic this season. That you might be able to trade for using someone ranked near 35 right now. Because of injury fears and because of negative publicity and because of the eye test and all that stuff. And like, I don't care. I don't know how many games. How many games does Philly have left? How many have they played so far? We're like 15 games into the season, 13, 15, something like that. What's Philly? 2-11? 2-11. They're 13 games in. There's still 69 damn games left. I don't care if he misses 15 to 20 of those. It's still worth it. I hope it's not that many, but the Sixers have plenty of back-to-back, so it's going to be at least a good chunk. Go do it. The other name, by the way, that falls into this same bucket I thought we could talk about on today's show is Trey Murphy III. And this one I think actually is going to be a harder one to buy low on because the minutes are low. And so what people are seeing is, he hasn't ramped up yet. And it's a much more obvious he hasn't ramped up yet than Embiid, who's playing 30 minutes a game and just sort of looks like he's playing underwater. With Trey Murphy, he's just on a bad team, and he played 24, 26, 29 minutes or whatever. But this is still just this wide open golden road for Trey Murphy to take advantage of, especially while most of his team is out. He's just getting his sea legs underneath him. I wasn't quite as high on Trey Murphy as some other analysts were coming to this year. And a lot of that was because they're just a lot of guys I thought they'd have to feed in New Orleans. I don't know that that's ever going to be the case this year. Like, I don't know when Zion's going to show up. Are they going to have to try to figure out this season without him? He wants to play, but he's out for a while, and DeJounte's been out a while, and CJ's been out a while, and on and on and on and on and on. And now, right now, much like we were talking about with who the hell were we just talking about a minute ago? You could probably get Trey Murphy for an overperforming late rounder. like a Tyus Jones at 99. I actually might prefer Tyus Jones. That's a bad example. Jonas Valanciunas at 98. Who else is in there? Who did we just talk about a second ago? I don't think Jeremy Grant will get it done, but I would try. Gafford, Grant, Bub. Is there a name deeper down the board than that? Jalen Green, Andrew Wiggins, Alex Sarr, Donovan Clingan, who's an interesting stash guy, Zach Edey, Drew Holiday, who's a sell low, so that's maybe not the right idea. I don't know that I would go Drew Holiday. I think Trey Murphy and Drew end up ranked pretty close to one another. But he's available, and we may need to go figure out the price tag on him. But he, like Embiid, was out for a while, has come back, and he hasn't been quite as good as people would have hoped. But if someone drafted him, they probably had super high hopes for him anyway. With Embiid, people drafted him that didn't expect much. They were like, well, I guess I got to go Embiid, because it was like pick 12, and they were like, I can't possibly not draft Embiid at this point. And I didn't want this guy anyway. Here, you take him for a top 30-something guy. That to me, I know that sounds crazy, but just based on what I'm seeing, it's tea leaf reading, mind you, but just based on what I'm seeing in comments and tweets, whatever, and like general perception, I don't think the teams that have Joel Embiid want to still have them. And I think a lot of the teams that have Trey Murphy still kind of do. Like, he was probably a guy. He was one of the guys that manager wanted to go get in the middle rounds. And so they're going to be oddly more attached to a guy they drafted at like 90 versus the guy they took at 13. And I want to talk about two players that are injured right now as the last two names on today's show, and that's Dejounte Murray and Scottie Barnes. These two guys are not that far away from returns. We got like semi-positive reports over the last 2 or 3 days on both of them. I can't remember what the exact report was on Barnes. I think he's set to be reevaluated today or tomorrow. So, again, you may not have that much time to work on Scottie Barnes. With Dejounte Murray, I think he got cleared for something, but that still means that he's a little ways away. So, you've got these managers that have been sitting on these guys for a couple of weeks. These are going to be tougher ones to pull off because it's probably a little bit late in the game. But thinking through again the fact that they really didn't play much before they went down, these guys, in full disclosure, these guys are probably like one injury update too late to go trade for. Like, you probably needed to go trade for Scottie Barnes before the injury update. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe you have a couple hours. But if the update comes out today, later tonight, for instance, or tomorrow morning, and it's like, oh, Scottie Barnes is resuming on-court activities, he's going to be back in the near future, you're not going to be able to get him. So you legitimately might have just a couple of hours now to go try to figure out what a Scottie Barnes team is looking for him and make it work. And that's maybe not enough time to bring that all together. He's ranked number 83, but a lot of that was small sample size stuff because like 19 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, that plays. The 4 turnovers do not. That's a problematic number. And Barnes last year was at 28 and 6. Turnovers were at 2.8. Percentages were not all that different than what they've been through his very short season so far this year. The blocks are low. The steals are high. Like, if he keeps doing this long term and the turnovers come down, and let's say the 3-pointers go up a little bit, that'll push him right back into that top 30 mix. So see if you can do something quick. See if you can throw out, I don't think I would give up more than a top 40-something guy for him right now, because again, that you're waiting on that remark. So Adebayo at 46 is an intriguing one to flip out there, although he's a little bit of a sell low, as the steals and blocks are pretty high, so maybe it's not a sell low necessarily. Who else is in that range that might work? It's a tough one to pull off for Scottie Barnes. You got to be willing to give up something. Pascal Siakam, might be willing to dump him. He's at 55% shooting. He's basically the only Pacer that can make a bucket so far, and feels like he's the one guy who might go the wrong way when this stuff levels off. So Siakam is one I might think about offering up for Scottie Barnes. I don't think Pirtle and Anunoby, those types of guys probably wouldn't be enough. I don't really want to give up Jalen Johnson because I think he's pretty much going to be Scottie Barnes this year. Franz Wagner is an interesting one because when Paolo comes back, his job shrinks considerably. Evan Mobley at 36 is an interesting one, just like we talked about a minute ago. Hero's not going to be enough. You would have to pair him up with somebody. And I don't know if I'd go much higher. And the guys I would give up going higher, I don't think are going to be enough to do it. Like Dyson Daniels is number 14, but I don't think he's going to get you Scottie Barnes by himself. Same with CJ McCollum, who's also hurt, so that probably doesn't help. Derek White, I don't think would get it done. And frankly, I might rather have Derek White. But this is what you guys should be thinking about. And you just have a very narrow window to try to pull this one off. And then Dejounte Murray, he's one where we may have waited one update too long because we knew when he went down that it was going to be about 4 weeks. And October 23rd was exactly 4 weeks ago. 1, 2, 3, 4, minus 1 day. It's 27 days ago. And so we knew it was going to be 4 to 6 weeks. So you can't wait until the 4-week mark to make the move there. You've got to do it at the 3-week mark. So Dejounte, we probably should have talked about him last week. I think he profiles as a top 50 kind of guy. Unfortunately, it's probably going to take about a top 50 guy to get him right now because the guy who sat on him for the last 4 weeks is like, yeah, I'm not going to give him up for anything less than what I drafted for because I already did the hard part. But he's probably going to be out another week to 10 days. So maybe, just maybe, you've got a manager that's like, look, I've waited long enough. I don't want to do it anymore. Try offering up someone like a Zach LaVine who's scoring a lot, but the rest of his stuff is pretty much maxed out, and he has a lot of name recognition. You could try giving up someone like Norman Powell. I don't know if that would be enough. That probably won't get it done, but I would think about it. Norm is down to number 55. He's already petered out a little bit because he doesn't do anything besides score at a high clip. So he's a thought-provoking one. Michael Porter Jr. had no business being in the top 30. He's back down. I think Porter Jr. could be around a 50 range guy. And so I think, it's opportunity to maybe trade up by a little bit. Let's see who else is out there that might make sense here. I don't know if I'd go much higher than those guys for Dejounte. Anunoby might get it done. I think I'd go OG. So then you're getting out of the health risk. That's an interesting one. Eason won't be enough. Freddie VanVleet, I think, is still going higher than this. So no. Josh Hart, is that going to be enough? Probably not. Think about it, though. Brandon Ingram at 60. That's one to give up. Oh, that's a perfect fit. Zach LaVine, Brandon Ingram are your perfect fits to go get Dejounte Murray right now. I think that's the ones that would work. And I think those are the ones that I would probably do. And I don't know that anybody else farther down the board gets it done. But if you can get him for Jaylen Brown or Rudy Gobert, that changes your team a lot, though. Those are guys that I would certainly try as well. They're in the 65 to 80 range, but they do have a lot of name power, and they're pretty much where you'd expect them to be. And that's your Buy Low show for today, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Dan Bespris. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, you can throw them into the comments tab. Hit that like button and subscribe on the way out. Drop that 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, and we'll be back with you tomorrow to break down the Tuesday card. And if I have time, tomorrow we can do a little hot and cold. That's one of my new fun ones we're doing weekly. I hope you guys like it because I like doing it, and it does take a lot of work to update the board. And if it sucks, I don't want to do all that work anymore. But whatever. See you guys on social at Dan Bespris. Follow me over there because we got a bunch of stuff to do between now and tomorrow when the next podcast is popping. And again, it's Old Man Squad over on Blue Sky, if that's where you guys have migrated. Dan Bespris on Twitter. See you tomorrow, everybody. Bye-bye.